All right, good afternoon and welcome to Talk on Race. We are finally back from a much needed Sabbath, a much needed rest to kind of regroup and rebrand. Give me 1 second, y'all. Technical difficulty.
Okay.
Right. Okay. I think we're back. So sorry about those technical difficulties, but we are again welcome you back to Talk on Race. We have rebranded ourselves. This series, we've decided to launch a series into Talk on Race. So I'm really excited about this series. This series is covering interracial relationships. Today, we're starting out with dating and marriage. In March, we're going to move to interracial adoption. And then we're going to end our series on interracial friendships. So I really hope that you find some fruitful conversations, that you really learn some really great things. And then ultimately, we really want, people to walk away knowing that like love is love and love is love. I don't think there's anything else needed. So as usual, we're going to start off with our land acknowledgement. The Lower Cape Fear YWCA serves people located within the Lower Cape Fear region. This land once thrived with life from indigenous peoples known today as the Cape Fear Indians and the Waccamaw Siouan Indian people. Living in established settlements along the Cape Fear River and Lake Waccamaw, along with many other established sites in the region. We need to protect and honor the history of these places. Indigenous people are not relics of the past. They are still here, continuing to demonstrate their talents and gifts amidst the backdrop of ongoing colonialism and oppression. They are worth celebrating. We hope our land acknowledgement statement will inspire others to stand with us in solidarity with Native nations. So to begin with quick introductions, first I would like to introduce Jason Villegas and Elizabeth Villegas. They are joining us, and Glenda Adams is joining us, and then Charmaine Webster. So thank you all so much for coming together and being willing to be vulnerable and sharing your story about being in an interracial marriage, dating interracially, and then being open to share with our audience your experiences. So if you can start out, anybody can start out and discuss with me. Tell me about how you first met this person and like, where did the love begin? And if race was a factor in the beginning of love. So anybody can go first.
Okay, I'll go first. I'll be
Come
that
on,
bold.
Charmaine.
So my husband and I, it'll be almost 8 years that we've been together, but we actually met in seminary in preaching class. If anybody knows me, I'm like Black feminist. I was not trying to get no MRS degree, and yet and still here I am today. So he actually was an exchange student from Germany in my seminary program, and we met my very last semester at school. For him, it was love at first sight. For me, I knew he was a great person and like we were friends, but I just like wasn't trying to go there. But we just built a really strong friendship. And one day he surprised me with a surprise gift for Christmas after we had been apart. Like he was back in Germany and I was in America. And I had to admit to myself, like, man, I do like you. And there began our like Disney princess love affair. It really is. It's almost disgusting. A few months later, he came to no, really. A few months later, he came to visit me, and everybody fell in love with him. My family, me, and I was scared. I'm gonna be honest. I was scared because I wanted to be the president of the free Black world. Like that, it was my goal in life. I never even wanted to be married or really thought about it like that. And so I was like, how am I gonna do this with a white dude? And like I sat him down, and a white German dude, like he's not even from this country. He's from Eastern Germany. His family history is rich in of itself. And I told him, like, I love Black people. Like, can you take that? Like, I will die for my people. And I was so afraid. And all my friends were like, Charmaine, just date him, just have fun, just be cool. Like, don't be so serious. But he was serious about me. And so here we are together almost 8 years. I don't think it really was ever a thing for him as much as it was for me, to be honest, because I just never saw myself in an interracial relationship. If I was going to be with anybody, it was going to be with Morris Chestnut. And so he's not.
Say that.
But yeah, we met in school and we've been cool ever since. So that's kind of our story.
Yeah. Jason, Elizabeth, what is your story?
Yeah, so we both met at our alma mater, Chowan University, located in the Meherrin River watershed, home of the Meherrin and Chowanok people. And we're actually back in Murfreesboro now after like a decade, and both serving as pastors in the area. But we met and fell in love around sports. I had started a club called the Smurf Club. We'd paint ourselves blue, so think like Cameron Crazies, except
a much smaller school, nowhere near the athletic budget that Duke has. In Campus Stadium.
So we would use house paint and stuff like that. Proposed at the 50-yard line, painted blue with a blue mohawk, and everything. But for us as an interracial couple, when we started dating, I had pretty much grown up assimilated into white culture, and I have moved back, kind of swam back upstream, and now preaching in Spanish every week and connected a lot more with my Mexican heritage. But it's so I realized that there's kind of a distinction. We started as according to how race has been created in this country, as an interracial couple, but now we have kind of transitioned to become more of a multicultural couple as well. And neither of us started dating preparing for that. So this is I would say our love affair, if you will, Charmaine, is still going on. But it's a lot more complex now because our identity politics are growing and changing, and our family is, and we are.
In our language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And Glenda, I do want to put that disclosure out there. Glenda is married, but the relationships that she was going to talk about is going to be previous. So like previous dating, okay? Because I love her husband, and so we don't want no problems. But Glenda, can you talk about maybe what drew you to dating other races, and what your experience has been?
Well, originally I am from New York and grew up in a melting pot. So living in Manhattan, in the city, working, playing, some of the things that I enjoyed doing organically involved just multiple races, because you just have such an amazing cross section of races in New York. Every country that you can imagine is represented, and at any given day and time, you can interact depending on what the nature of what you're doing is with anyone. So for me, it ended up happening organically just because of some of the activities that I was doing, some of the people that I was encountering. It's like you go to an event, somebody strikes up a conversation with you. And also, I'm an avid reader, and I was reading a book way back in the day by Michelle McKinney Hammond, and it was something, one of those how to find love, what to do when love finds you books. And she made a point saying that you'll meet the person that you're supposed to be with when you're living your natural life. So I always looked at organic connections, and it was just a matter of somebody striking up a conversation with me, asking for my phone number. You saying, okay, do I want to date this person? Do I want to try? And then just not being afraid. I've always been kind of fearless, and I'll try it. If someone has engaging conversation, if someone is attractive, if someone is charming, for me it was, well, let's try it. So one person is funny because I dated him in my 20s and we are still friends. I was just texting him the other day, and I was at a restaurant with one of my girlfriends, and he was at a restaurant with a friend of his, and the four of us just ended up having an amazing conversation. And we were talking about skating, and he said, well, can I take you rollerblading sometimes? And I said, sure. So we exchanged phone numbers. We were in the West Village, so he was with a friend, and I couldn't tell if they were a couple or what the dynamic was between them. But he was like, oh, can I just, after the conversation, can I have your number to take you skating? And I said, sure. And we just started spending time together, and polar opposites when it came to certain things. I mean, he had at the time waist length blonde hair, was into heavy metal. His favorite band was Kiss. And I'm like,
wow,
I like New Edition, I like hip hop. I'm just, we just had such amazing commonalities. We had amazing conversation. He was very, very kind. And to me, that trumped anything else, just how he treated me. He was gorgeous. But how he treated me was the main factor, that here's a person that doesn't look like me, that doesn't fit into a box that I think he should fit into, but he's kind, he's good. We laugh, we have a good time together.
Can you talk about what your experience was like when you were dating? So, when you went out in the community, did you get stares? And this question is for Charmaine too. I have a different question for Jason and Elizabeth. But did you get the looks like, oh, did you get, what was that experience like?
Yes. So interestingly enough, so I dated multiple races living in New York. So anyone from the Latinx community never really got any stares, never got any comments. When I went out with someone who's Caucasian, and he wasn't the only one that I went out with, but I would get stares. I remember one time we were in a Fridays, and it was a whole table of African Americans, men and women, and they would just look like friends or something, and they kept staring. So eventually I turned around and looked to see, oh, what's back there? What are they keep looking at? And realized it was no one behind us. They were looking at us like, oh, she don't look this like that. The comments that we got the most were from Black men. Black men were very disrespectful at times, and white women, they were very disrespectful as well. What are you doing with him? Why are you with him? Well, you shouldn't be with her. They were blatant, and they didn't care, and they thought just because they saw something that they did not like, that gave them license to speak on it. So we Black men and white women were the most vocal when it came to making comments. Again, when I was out with someone from the Latinx community, no comments, none, no stares. I don't know if it was just because of the Black-white dynamic that people commented, but people got very verbal at times. By the same token, if we were out somewhere and he would go to the men's room or something, white men would approach me. I don't know if they felt it gave them license to just say something, but I felt it was disrespectful. I'm with someone on a date, and you're approaching me to say, hi, I found you attractive. How are you? Here's my number. So that was interesting. But I did at a hockey game meet someone else I dated while I was with him, another white gentleman. he said it just started off, take my card, I'm in real estate. And then he said, okay.
Player from the Himalayas.
One thing Janiqua, I enjoyed dating. I'm happily married now, but I took full advantage of and truly, truly enjoyed dating, because when I got married, I really wanted to be ready to be the best wife that I could be. And in dating, I learned a lot about what I liked, what I didn't like, what I enjoyed, what I didn't enjoy. And it takes fortitude to have a Black-white relationship in America.
Yeah. Charmaine, what was your experience?
Yeah, so two things. So I actually grew up in a white school district. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. I basically integrated my school district. I kid you not, in 92, when I was in sixth grade, there were 13 Black people in the whole school district. So I mean, that's part of the reason why I'm so radical, because I grew up in this kind of environment. But so with that, I didn't grow up, except for one or two boys, really having the boys at my school like me, right? So I grew up with this message, really, white dudes ain't, I mean, your family says they all want us, but that's almost like a fetish kind of belief. But in school, only one boy that really had a crush on me for years. But outside of that, I really didn't. All the Black kids at my school talked and dated. There was one boy at another school. We were actually really good friends, and we both liked each other, and he was white, but we never were on the same wavelength. I was always with somebody when he wasn't. So this was in the early 2000s, and I'm 16. We finally, in 11th grade, went on a date. It finally worked out for us both to kind of go out. And we went out in his community, and he was from a very affluent suburb in Cincinnati. And so I just remember that date. I could feel the stares. I remember we walked into an ice cream parlor, and I felt like I walked into a 1956 something, because everybody was looking at us and everybody was staring. And he was totally oblivious. He was just he did not notice it. And I felt it. I felt it. I was so uncomfortable. And that's probably part of the reason why I really wasn't trying to seriously date white guys after that, because even during our date, we ended up watching the movie Soul Plane, and we never laughed at the same thing. And I noticed it, and he was not noticing any of this. I met his mom and dad. His dad was cool. His mom was he had to stand up to his mom for me. And we had been friends for years, because we both did track. And so that was my first experience. And it was with a guy I really liked. And I remember he tried to kiss me by the end of the night. And I kid you not, I was so uncomfortable at that point. I was just I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I was I've never kissed a white boy before. What's happening? It really was kind of a scary experience at that moment. I just wasn't confident enough. Like she said, I didn't have the fortitude at this age and with my experiences to really be in an interracial relationship. And I was in high school, but then fast forward now, Lord Jesus, 10 years later, and I'm actually in a relationship. And it's funny, the only other white guy I've ever dated ended up being my husband. As an adult, the only adult interracial relationship that I had. And it's funny, because you get two things. You get, like she said, Black men, oh girl, I know he can't do it like you, like I could. I'm why is this the first thing out your mouth? Why are you even coming to me like this? I will go off on you. Then you have the sisters, right, whose assumption is I'm with him because there are no good Black men, which is really frustrating to me. It's I'm not with my husband as a this is my only option. That may be some people's story, but that's definitely not mine. But then the stares happen in different settings. I think when we're in white settings, he's more sensitive to it. And when we're in Black settings, I'm more sensitive to it. And he's also not from this country. So his racial viewpoints are very different, because in Germany, there isn't a native Black German. That's like it is for us. And I put that in quotes. And so really didn't even grow up with Black people like that. But you also get the people that are fans. And it's so annoying. It's like, oh, I'm so proud of y'all. Oh my gosh, like y'all are really here to change. It's like, I am not with him to change America. And marriage is not changing America. Like, stop that foolishness.
Yeah.
You know, so, and that I can't stand it. I think that probably gets on my nerves with the most. Is like the people that are really cheering for us. It's like when you act like that, you're making this even less normal. Like, just say hi and bye, or don't speak to me at all. You know,
just treat me like a regular couple
Right.
that you see. Like, I'm at dinner, you're at dinner. Like, I don't need public affirmation for my choices.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
It's very, you know, it's just annoying because either way, like none of these responses are normal. Either we're being fetishized, or, you know, this is the future, or whatever the case may be, or, you know, why are you making this decision? And my choice is being questioned. And it really not his. Like, right. Like my husband really doesn't get questioned about being married to me as much as I get comments and questions about being married to him. So yeah.
I wonder, is some of that just because, you know, culturally, sometimes Black women in general have to answer for things, right? Like, we have to answer for our hair. We have to answer for our weight. We have to answer for, do we want to be natural today or not? We have to answer for how we raising our children, how many children we have. And so I wonder if some of that is coming from a cultural expectation of like how we are supposed to show up.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think also, like, Black women marry and date out of their race the least, where Black men do it the most, right?
Statistically, yeah.
Yes, you know, statistically. And so it's like we, you know, me being seen doing this is almost like a betrayal. It's felt like I'm betraying my people in making this choice and making this decision. And we have to answer for our betrayal. Or there has to be a good reason, like, well, there just aren't men for you, right? Like there has to be a reason why I'm making this choice that has nothing to do actually with centering myself, right?
Other than the fact that I met a man and I fell in love.
Right, exactly. That's not enough. That's not a good enough answer.
Yeah.
And can I interject something before you move on? And two things. One, historically, just because of the relationship between the slave master and the slave woman, that white male, Black female dynamic, historically it's been taboo. It's not been done willingly. And it's also another reminder of some of the oppressiveness that we've gone through as Black women in the United States. So it's seen as this person, you know, raped your foremothers, you know, forced you into this. How could you willingly be in a relationship with the enemy, is how some people see it. And then she mentioned the fetish, that there are some white men who look at Black women as a fetish. So when I was dating, that was a question that I asked. Have you dated interracially before? If so, what nationalities, what races? And if they hadn't, well, why me? Why are you attracted to me? Because I did not want to be anyone's fetish or fantasy. And, you know, if they didn't have true intentions toward me, then you'd be able to tell it early. So some people, you can tell it's just that they're attracted to you and it's their normal commonplace way to live, but you're able to weed out who sees you as a fetish, and they are out there, they exist, and they have no good intention towards you. So just wanted to bring up that point before you move on.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely think that that's definitely a point, because I think there are fetishes in all varieties, and you know, we do have to be honest about that. And so my question for Elizabeth and Jason is, when you, as you use the term intercultural, kind of using intercultural practices in your marriage and with your children, how has the community embraced that? Like, you know, has there been questions? Have there been comments? You know, I think when people look at you, Jason, I don't think that they see someone who has Mexican heritage, right? Like, they may not look at you and go, oh, like, he can speak Spanish. So, you know, what has the community, how has that felt as a family to kind of embrace your cultural roots? And then what has that looked like, and what experience has that been for you?
So I think it's really a contextual thing. Like it depends on who we're around. But so for me, my journey back into my Mexican heritage and as a Latino has been through church. And so that's both through a lot of the people that you know from Duke, Alma, Ernesto, Ismael, Edgar. And they, I remember them inviting me to have a seat at the table, and I was like, I'm the least Latino person in the room. Like I can barely speak Spanish. And they were like, but you know, that's how, like, that's there's an old book called The Future is Mestizo. So like a lot of families that have immigrated here, their kids are more and more, you know, like grappling with being like a puente, a bridge in between both worlds. And so in church space, a lot of times, like my journey has been becoming a bridge. And I wasn't raised United Methodist. I was raised in a charismatic space, and evangelical, if you will. And I wasn't raised in a Spanish speaking migrant or immigrant community. So like right now I'm a bridge between two things that I'm not like 100% either of these things. But usually I would say like it's met with a lot of grace. I will say that in my experience of people trying to speak another language, Spanish speakers are 1,000 times more patient with someone trying to learn the language than English speakers usually are with someone trying to learn the language here in North Carolina, from what I've experienced. But in church, there's I would say a lot of grace. And right now our kids are being raised going, like, in the morning time they'll be in worship service in English, in the afternoon in a worship service in Spanish. And so it's normative for them to be somewhere where like they understand some Spanish but not fully. And so I would say one of the biggest markers for me is the willingness to be in an uncomfortable space. Sometimes in the ivory tower, they use the term liminal space, like being in this space that's not here nor there, but it's in between, it's becoming something. We're not 100% sure what it's becoming yet. So we're in the liminoid a lot. But just embracing the journey of becoming.
Yeah. In the beginning, for me, it was just the change of a last name, going from a very white last name of Miller to Villegas. That in the beginning, that's what it was, because that's what the middle letters are the same. ILLE. But in the beginning, that's what it was, because culturally, that's all that changed, really. But as Jason has been so supported in reaching to his roots, and it's been so beautiful to see people, first generation migrants coming in, second generation, and saying, just because you're third generation, you're still one of us. And so that part of the transition has been so beautiful. But it has been hard for me. I've had to really come to terms with my white fragility. I have felt, as Jason's on this beautiful journey, which really started with Sean Palmer, let's be honest.
Back in
For people who don't know, Sean is my husband.
Yes. But it's been really hard for me to have him go on this journey, and my insecurities, like, is this what he wants with this? Does he still want to be with a white girl? And having to come to terms with my insecurities, and both of us needing to find that space within our marriage to say, like, this is bothering me, and having that open and vulnerable conversation in a time when we can, because it's not always the time to have that conversation, because it's so deeply rooted within us. But there was this one time before Jason really went on this journey where a person recognized that he was Latino and was spouting off awful racist rhetoric, anti-immigrant rhetoric. Just, it was awful. And we had at that time, we just had one child, and I had to go in the car and I cried. And he came back to the car and he said, "What happened?" And I was like, "That was awful." And he said, "Stuff like that happens to me more often, but not when you're with me, because you make me look more white." And it was this moment where there's this whole other side of him. And we'd been married for several years, that like, because whenever I'm with him, he's seen as more white. It was groundbreaking for me, really much needed for me to move forward. But it is interesting that he has this whole other life, not another life, but another, he goes through society in a different way, right? When I'm not next to him. So it's been hard, but it's been a beautiful, beautiful thing to go through as well.
And something else that I've noticed about that is that, like, most people, I would say, that I know who are in multiracial relationships don't have the option of blending in or assimilating. And so this, like Elizabeth mentioned, it's been a journey of recognizing her own white fragility, but it has been for me too, because I've benefited from white supremacy, and like I've had to learn how to excise part of me that ideas that I've been formed with that seek to bleach or whitewash things around me. But I would say that so in My Grandmother's Hands, Resma Menakem talks about he uses the term bodies of culture instead of bodies of color. And so I would say this journey has, like, even it hasn't solved problems, it's created a lot of problems, but it's also been this immense gift of receiving culture as a gift from so many different places. And it's easy to get bogged down in a lot of what's painful, but I think for me the real gift has been the depth that also comes along.
Yeah, I think that was beautifully said. And I think that the journey is beautiful, because in having those hard places, in like the wrestling of like, what does this do for me, for us, for our families? Like, we can't solve and answer all these questions, but the beautiful part is that we are at the point where we can talk about it, and where we can begin brainstorming about how can we beautifully rearrange it, so that as our children are growing up, like, they understand, like, they get to be all of who they can be. Something funny that happened this morning, I know all parents with children have seen Encanto, okay? Encanto. And so we literally listened to it on the way to school, and like Zachary's in the back, like, jamming. We don't talk about Bruno, no, like, he's jamming. And in that moment, I just was like, Zachary doesn't realize it, but when I was growing up, I didn't have shows that showed brown people. And then Encanto did a great job of showing, like, a lot of what you said, Jason. They showed Latinx people who could assimilate, Latinx people who could not, because they had more melanin in their skin. But I think through the journey of like the questions, we get beautiful experiences with our children, who will then grow up and can probably answer some of these questions and can wrestle with it easier, because we have done the hard work. We've done that hard work. So I kind of want to move forward a little bit, even though, like, I really love this conversation. How have you managed some of the cultural differences and cultural expectations? So, Charmaine, your husband is from Germany. So, like, What does Thanksgiving look like? What does Christmas look like? What does Black History Month look like? Um, you know, uh, what are some of the cultural expectations that maybe you grew up with, maybe are a little different now? Like, do we still put ham hocks in our collard greens at
That is so funny.
Thanksgiving, or do we like what do we do?
Right, right. And I think not. So I know that my experience is different because I'm not married to a white American, right? I'm married to a German, somebody, not somebody that grandparent came over here in 1930, but that's actually from there directly. So our experience is probably different from a lot of people's because honestly, my husband is just in my world most of the time. So even his experience of America, he's experiencing it as a man married to a Black woman. And that is because in a way, my husband is becoming white. Like he's his skin has always been white, but he was German. And over here, people aren't gonna know he's German unless he says so. Right. And so some of those expectations, Thanksgiving, well, that isn't even celebrated in Germany. They don't care. Um, but as far as like travel to see each other, we make trips there every other year. And then his family comes here on the year that we're not there. And so that is different because even during that time, I'm in his world, he's not in mine. I'm having to deal with my stuff and how I feel about things when most of the time he's dealing with my life and how he feels about things. So it's a little bit different, but than what would normally happen. But what I can say is that one thing, and we actually just got back from Germany a couple of weeks ago, and I have gone through this process of being like, wait a minute, we really could make our life there. And while I was there, I was processing as Black Americans, there is a movement of people leaving, but for the most part, that hasn't been what we've decided to do. In fact, when we left, it's been seen as almost in some ways like you left us here to suffer out there, type of thing. But Africans do it all the time. They have their native land, but they'll go somewhere else. And so, we've had conversations about making sure that our children are being raised bilingual. Because that's something that I want. I don't want my children to not know their German history, which is not a concern I would have had if they were Black kids. They would have just had me and us and what we've had to give. But it's a lot because I have to learn a new language, right? And I want to learn it, and as well as his family is trying to improve their English for the times that we are together, so that we can actually. Because with the language barrier, there is a relationship barrier. There's only so far that we can go. And if we choose not to learn each other's language, then we are also choosing not to be in deeper relationship, right? And so that is a big thing because of knowing people that are immigrants or that grandparents can't speak to grandchildren. We don't want that. So we can learn from lessons of generations that have had to deal with those types of issues. But as far as like food, Benjamin can make better cornbread and greens than me. Like he
Go ahead,
really can. I'm like, why does your stuff taste better than mine? And it's because his experience of America, at least especially during the beginning parts of our relationship and marriage, were really grounded in my experience. So sometimes it'll be funny, like people here will hear him talk and they're like, man, you sound like a Black woman because his language, is coming from me, is coming from us. And I forget that sometimes, and now he is pastoring and he's pastoring in Ohio. Ohio is conservative as heck, at a white church in a different kind of community. And so now there's a new challenge because I cannot fuss at everybody else and get on all these white folks for what they do. What are you doing at your church? Your church didn't have a pastor for 2 years during this movement. They haven't had to face anything. And so, him now finding his way, because my husband is a very harmonious person. Like he will try to find middle ground on as much as possible. That and not just because of like an American perspective, that is just in who he is. He's not very confrontational. And so now, even recently, there was a church group of faith leaders that wanted to do a community organization, but they were basically writing a doctrine that was homophobic, that was like anti, multi-religious type of thing. And I'm like, you don't need a doctorate to do community service, but they want to be Christian. They want to do this. They want to do that. And Benjamin is like, I can't sign on to this, and I tried to tell him, there's not always a middle ground. Sometimes you have to just choose a side, and end up being that he couldn't move forward with this community, but it was driving him crazy because he was like, the way they think, the way they're acting, the way they feel, like it's just like you're swallowed up in their world. And I said to him, and this is what I've had to live with for 33 years. And he was like, I think for him to experience it in a different way, it gave him a deeper understanding of this is what we're always dealing with. It's not just a conversation. Now you know how it feels, because his perspective in Germany is a different perspective than here, even though in American film and media, Germans are always the villain.
Yeah, always in American, yeah.
Right. It's Germans, Russians, never the English, right? But it's because there's still this narrative of what Hitler did, and not the history behind how they've actually dealt with their issues in a way that we have not. And so, not that it's perfect, but it's a very different, it builds a different people when you apologize and when you've lied and when you've had to have some recompense for what you've done. So, I think because we don't necessarily have that American and a Black American dynamic, white American, Black American dynamic, we are able to enjoy each other's cultures in a way that I know a typical white Black relationship might not be able to. But at the same time, because this is our framework and we are in America, there's still things that you have to recognize as a white person that you're responsible for, that you have to deal with, that people don't know certain things unless they see us, unless you're speaking. And so my gentle nature husband, right? My gentle nature husband is now he's become white, right? And he's seen as white, and he has to deal with the ramifications for that within our home and outside of our home. But as far as food and stuff, we good.
So a question that I think both of you, everyone has kind of tried to answer, but I would love to ask it head on. How have you dealt with your defensiveness? With like, you don't understand what we've been through as a culture. I think Elizabeth, when you had that moment with Jason, like, you get treated like this all the time, like, and he's like, yeah, girl, this welcome. Like, how do you deal with the defensiveness that sometimes has to come in when you do date interculturally or interracially?
Communication, for me, was key. Being able to express how I felt about a situation. Like when I had a Black man yell at me in the train station, it hurt my feelings, because, growing up, Black men are our protectors. They're our fathers, our brothers, our cousins. And to have someone attack me for a date that I was on was very hurtful. And when you have that white male backpack privilege, you don't see it the same. Like, oh, he's just a jerk, ignore him. It's hard to ignore someone from your community who feels like you've turned against them. And its communication was important, key. This hurt, and this is why. You don't see it, and you don't see it that way because of historically the way you've been treated, but I'm treated differently. So communication when you are dealing with people from different cultures, that's paramount and key. So it's just taking the time to understand, taking the time to explain, and being verbal about how you feel. Because if you continue to swallow it, if you don't address it, and if you don't say anything, then they don't know. It continues to happen. And then it didn't happen again, but the next time it would have happened, his interaction would have been a little different as well. And Charmaine, I understand, having traveled to Germany, it's a different experience. The construct of race in America is different. So he's not coming with the baggage of being a white man in America. That is totally different. But having your perspective is great. I've always been pro-Black marching, signing things. Back in the day, just, dealing with Amnesty International, dealing with going on marches. And I remember my mother saying, if you end up marrying a white man, you're going to make his life miserable because you're so Black. And it's not that way. It's a matter of understanding. I can be pro-Black. I love who I am in my melanated skin and my curviness, and just having whoever I'm dating understand that no way, anywhere I go in the world, I'm going to be a brown woman. That doesn't change for me, but what can change is how we interact with each other and face the world.
Yeah, yeah.
I appreciate, Janiqua, that you brought defensiveness into it, because Elizabeth could tell you I can be really defensive. I struggle a lot in every part of my life with imposter syndrome. And so in my head, there's this soap opera that's always playing, and I'm constantly having to make a defense or an apologetic for my particular like mode of being. And I feel like I have something to prove a lot. And so when like particularly within our relationship, when issues of race come up, sometimes I overreact. And I appreciate what you said, Glenda, about communication. So on the way over here, Elizabeth and I were in the car and talking about how sometimes we say the right thing in the wrong time, or with the wrong attitude. And I would say, like, it is very, like, when we get into conflict and things around race or culture on the table, it is very rarely what is said, but it's either timing or attitude. All those other non-verbal communication things, they get brought in, and a lot of that also has to do with the outside world. So I have this desire to try to get it right, and sometimes that turns into a desire to be right. And I'm have such a fear of getting canceled by some of my other friends or something. So I might come off a little bit too strong in our relationship, but a lot of that either like might connect with defensiveness, which connects with blame, which connects with shame, and a whole host of stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of grace.
Yeah, and like timing is just huge. And I think giving each other time to process is really hard. I'm an Enneagram 9, so I'm very peaceful, conflict avoidant until I'm not. And it's that until I'm not part that I have to work on. That, like, when we sit down and have a conversation, like, this is how this is making my body feel. We don't have to finish that conversation there, but there's some time that's needed. And I think that's also crucial in community conflict, that the whole conversation doesn't have to happen at that time, but that our relationships are made through time and space, and giving each other time to process, so that we're not defensive, but we can bring what we are defensive about in a way that is loving, and challenging. Definitely need to be challenged, but letting time heal and letting time do its job.
Yeah.
I'm so appreciative of our brother here. What's your name again, brother?
Jason.
Of just his honesty. What I would relate, when he talked about imposter syndrome, fear, there is, and try not to get emotional. I didn't expect this, Because I don't really talk about my relationship publicly much, outside of just our love for each other. But the insecurity that I can carry, or that I have carried, of being like, like Glenda said, you don't want people, I don't want y'all to think I don't love you when my whole life is dedicated to you. And just some of the growing kind of social media talk, there's so much there are people that just won't accept, or will discount me or count me out because I, married to a white man. And I feel like this is our relationship is the breeding ground for me truly being free to be myself and not concerned about others' opinions. And that's really hard as a person who, has a fear of rejection, as a person who wants everybody to like them, always have, because of just my life experience. I can't be like, that's no way to live, right? That, like, because I'm living prisoner to other people's opinions. And so working through the defensiveness, working through the imposter syndrome, working and dealing with the conflict of, I really love you, and Benjamin is my ride or die. My friends always joke, because they always say, you take him to the blackest spaces you can find. I took him to like the Escape Tour contest, right? Like concert, like the Escape, like Benjamin is there with me. He is there with me, right? When Black Lives Matter and I was about to go marching, he was like, you're not going by yourself. He is a very loyal and loving person. And so, and he doesn't have that baggage. And so I have to show up for you like that, and deal with whatever internal insecurities I have that have nothing to do with us, right? But that was kind of put in and put on me. And so I just know that I'm being transformed, and I'm grateful for Jason's transparency, because I'm not always there. There are times when I'm still like, I hope nobody's looking, that's just real. And I don't want to feel that way, but sometimes I do have that feeling. I do have that struggle. And so, but I think that's part of where the defensiveness comes in, not just with us, but like what I'm thinking the world is feeling. And then with us giving myself space, as our sister Elizabeth said, like when the movie Harriet came out, Benjamin really wanted to go with me. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to go with you. I'm like, and it has nothing to do with you, because I know you love me and I know this isn't you. But I just might not want to go with you. We end up going together. But it was just like being true and honest about some stuff, like what is it that I may not or may want to do, I'm not ready for right now. But I know that one day the Lord will have me whole and heal, and I will be ready for it in the future. But it's definitely a transformative experience to rid myself of these things that I don't own. You know what I'm saying? But that was put on me. And it's a work of the Lord. I'm telling you, because I'm not fully there yet. Like, I am still in process. As much as we love each other, as much as I love him, I still have to fight my imposter syndrome.
And there's discomfort only because that is how we were raised. That is the framework of the society that we live in, that we can't erase the history of America, and especially being the Black woman and the white male dynamic, it's there. And it makes you look inward, like, again, goes back to that, am I living my true self? And in doing that and loving the person that I love, am I betraying, my entire race? What does that look like? So it unfortunately is an uphill battle when you date interracially in America, only because of the construct that we've grown up in, the systematic racism that we face every day, and it's going to be probably beyond our generation before it changes. But with us, with being bold and making the loving choices that you've made when you married your partners, those things will continue to progress race relations forward. And it's only in doing so and having conversations about it that it'll change, because I think for years it was just swept under the rug. You can do that, but don't let anybody know, but you have a right to be able to be your authentic self, be a pro-Black, proud Black woman, be a proud Latinx, and still love the person that you choose to love.
Absolutely. That Glenda, that was beautiful closing words. And that is really the whole point of this conversation. You know, it's like interracial relationships and intercultural relationships, they should not be taboo. You know, we have to break down these frames of like what love should look like. We have to break down frames of, you know, well, this person has to be with this person in order for them to feel love, because love is love. Like Charmaine, when he rode for you at the Escape concert, sis, you should have looked over like, you know, God did his good work, you know? And you know, Jason and Elizabeth, as you're able to have these conversations that are really rich and vulnerable and transparent, and then you see it you see the results of it when you look at your beautiful children and they can sit through an English service and a service in Spanish. Like, I think that you know, that was one of the reasons why when I was thinking about what do I want this new series to be, I wanted it to be on conversations that some of us are really afraid to have, to say like, I'm in love with somebody who may not look like me, right? And I wanted it to have the conversation in a way that shapes love as beautiful, and that shapes love as positive, and that shapes love in a way that we are all deserving of love. And sometimes the love that we get is not packaged in a way that we thought. I mean, I laugh with Sean all the time. I thought I was going to marry a football player. And if you know my husband, he is an event planner, decor extraordinaire. You know, like, he is the complete opposite of that. But like, that is where my heart has found love. And I just think that if we were more open to love, our world would just be different. And if we were open to receiving it as much as we were to giving it, our world would just be so much better. It just would be a better place. So I really, really thank you all for being so vulnerable. I thank you for your stories. I thank you for the laughs. I thank you for just also being open to love that looks a little different than maybe your own context. And I really invite everybody to join us next month, where our Talk on Race series is about interracial adoption. I think that is another kind of taboo, you know, thing. I see people all the time in the grocery stores. I live in a predominantly white area. And so when you see, you know, white parents with Black children, I see like everybody in the store like looking. And I'm like, what are we looking at? You know? And it's just a mom with some kids. And I'm like, what is the big deal about? Why is everybody breaking their neck to look at this family? And so I really felt like our community needed to have the conversation about interracial adoption. How do we do it well? How do we do it in a way that respects the cultural norms and the culture that the children come from, as well as helping them embrace the culture that they find themselves in? And so I really hope that you join us for our next Talk on Race. And thank you so much to Jason and Elizabeth Villegas. And thank you to Glenda Adams Hardy and to Charmaine Webster. Thank you so much for your time. And y'all have a great night. If y'all could just stay on for 1 second, that